Tonight, we're talking about whether there is a dichotomy, whether faith and science can coexist. Often a very hot topic in our popular culture these days. Before I even get started, can I just have a show of hands? How many think they can coexist? Faith and science can coexist? Okay. How many of me think that they cannot? Oh, I think we should all just go home then. I'm sure some people are shy. So one of my stories, during my training in graduate school, I remember talking to one of my friends, and we were pipetting or doing experiments, and then we were talking about weekends. It's like, oh, so Jimmy, what did you do this weekend? And like, oh, I said, oh yeah, we had a church picnic and we're doing stuff. It's like, wait, you went to, did I hear church? And I'm just getting to know this. I'm like, yeah, no, I go to church on Sundays. And he's like, oh, Jimmy, I know. You're my friend and all, and this is what I'm going to tell you. And he said in a very whispery voice, don't tell other people you go to church. You'll commit intellectual suicide. And I was very sort of appreciative of his advice and his warm caring for me. And I told my friend, like, I think it's okay. I think faith and science can come together. And frankly, this is believed by a lot of people in our culture and in our society that there are strong antagonism between the two. And sort of the thing I'm going to sort of lay before the table is I'm going to argue sort of that there isn't this big tension between the two. Let me start off by, I'm going to talk about four things quickly. I don't have much time, only 12 minutes. I'm going to talk about four topics. I'm going to talk about history, talk about science, and talk about philosophy, and ultimately talking about faith. So historically. So I always think about what is sort of the biggest accomplishments of science? Like, what do people aspire to? Some people aspire to sort of winning the Nobel Prize, right? Like, wow, you win the Nobel Prize. That's sort of the ultimate achievement of science. In my opinion, actually, the thing that I aspire to one day is to have a unit of measure named after me. Because I don't know, you don't know, a lot of the Nobel, do you know who won the Nobel Prize in physics last year or chemistry, right? But you know these units of measure. And I dream of one day, one Jimmy, maybe it's a period of time, or maybe it's a distance, right? That's sort of, and interesting, if you look at sort of units of measure, which I sort of do for fun because I'm a nerd and I like to study these things, you have some of these sort of amazing people who've contributed significantly to science, and units of measures are named after them. Since we're at Harvard, people are smart. Let's do a little bit test of actually you know your units of measure. We'll start easy. What's the unit of measure of force? Newton, right? So Isaac Newton, fame, he invented a lot of sort of physics and sort of invented calculus on the side because he's so smart. But some of you know that he wrote a lot about religion, very sort of devout in his faith as well. So there's somebody who, unit measure named after him and very devoted in his faith. How about unit of pressure? Pascal, right? Pascal, not only known from his work on triangles, but also general mathematics, but his work on the Pensées, right? Amazing piece of French literature exploring faith as well. Okay, we'll get a little bit harder. Capacitance. Faraday, someone heard Faraday, right? Michael Faraday, again, these are not just sort of nominal church people because everybody was Christian. No, these were devout church members, himself, elder and a preacher in his church, right? Again, revolutionized the field. Atomic mass unit. Dalton, right? Lord Dalton, John Dalton, a very sort of devout Quaker. We'll go a little bit faster since there are a lot of these. This will be a little bit trickier, especially in the US. Temperature. Oh, see, I think I got some of you. Obviously, the right scientific way of measuring temperature is Kelvin. I think I heard about half. So William Thomson, Lord Kelvin, obviously his work in measuring temperature there, and the list goes on, right? So and also now units of measure like Maxwell's equation, John Maxwell, or think about Kepler's laws. So historically, there really not only was no tension between faith and science, that a lot of the luminaries, the people that have advanced the field and left their mark in terms of these units, were people of faith and of a very devout faith. And even, today, I'm at the NIH, and my boss's 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 boss is Francis Collins, who himself, right, is a very sort of devout Christian faith. And there are plenty of Christian scientists, this institution and other institutions that sort of see no tension. And so this sort of antagonism actually has been a rather recent phenomenon. But why so? Why is there sort of seemingly sort of fight between them? And I posit that this is potentially our sort of lack of understanding, potentially, of the role of science. Wow, that was quick, almost halfway. So science, what is science good at? And as a scientist myself, science is very good at explaining things that you can observe and that you can repeat, you can do experiments with. But then science, there's a lot of things that science cannot do, right? If you look at, the college, there's obviously many, many disciplines that science can't answer. You can't do an experiment to see whether Hitler lived or whether we landed on the moon, right? We can't, within our, for example, bioethics, right? We can do research in terms of figuring out gene engineering, but there is no scientific experiment that we can do to say whether that is right or wrong. Science can not tell you what's beautiful. Science is very, very powerful, but it is very sort of, you need to really understand what it's able to, the questions it's able to answer. And some people elevate science to be one of sort of a metaphysical. Often some people use the word scientism. And some of the scientists that you talk to may believe in this. And some of my friends, when I was doing research, and even now, I think that they believe that a fact can only be true if it can be proven scientifically. Or be proved from first principles. Some people call this positivism. This is a philosophy of science. What is sort of epistemology? What is true, right? Again, something can be true, only can be proved by science or derived by first principles. The problem with that statement is that very statement can't be proven scientifically or be derived from first principles. Do people get that? So if you were hearing this for the first time, like, wait a second, yeah. Because science starts from a method, from basic assumptions and presuppositions that cannot be proved scientifically. So even if I think science is very, very powerful, but even if you start to do science, there are things that underlie science. Often people, philosophers of science or epistemology, these provide the foundation on which to build science on. So let's sort of really think about science for what it is and not ultimately the only metric of all that's true. So then what are things that science can prove and what are the things that science can't prove, right? And this is where this is the sort of the conflict that often is in tension. And there's sort of a role of faith and there's a role of science. And often what people in the past, people think about religion as a ways that, this is a very common characterization is, what, we do science. If we don't know what's happening, we just sort of, God did it. Or, this is often called the God of the gaps. So, in sort of ancient, whether it's, we don't know, we didn't understand the water cycle, right? So we pray to the gods, and now we understand the water cycle. So the rain, we think that, we don't need a God for that. But the God of the Bible, the one I believe, is not one of the gaps. That we're only when we can't understand something, that's where God exists. Actually, it's the opposite. It's completely different, meaning God is the creator of all things, the God that I believe. And even if we understand the mechanisms of how we do it, understand sort of the how of these processes, it actually causes us to marvel even more. As I study whether, the complexity of the cell or what happens in our bodies or the complexity of the genome, it makes me marvel, not only sort of at the mechanism, but sort of the creator of that mechanism. So we're gonna sort of dive in much deeper in this, and I only have a very short amount of time. So that's sort of a little bit of taste of this. As a, I think I'll sort of talk a little bit about medicine in my sort of final 2 minutes. Is um, as a Christian and as so I do work for rare diseases, and there's patients that come to us, babies that are born, that are never going to speak, never going to walk, never going to contribute positively to society. But in our organization, we try to support them, we love them, and we see their families with them because intrinsically, we think that they have value because they have created in an image of God. So in that sense, my faith has tremendous impact on what I do, whether it's the science that I do as I sort of see the fingerprints of the Creator, or whether it's in terms of deciding what we're going to dedicate my life to, right? For purely utilitarian people who think that, you know what, we should only help people who, provide a positive impact, should we just sort of let these people on the road to die? Or if you're purely, an atheistic worldview, if they're not propagating positive genes to our gene pool, what should we do with them? And those are questions that because I'm not of that persuasion, it's hard for me to answer, but I can clearly say that from the faith tradition sort of that I'm in now, that it is amazing to be able to see the explanatory power of the Christian faith in almost everything that I do, not only science and politics, economics, in terms of ways that God is being made present in all these aspects. So we're going to dive in a little bit more, and I can talk about a little bit from my personal past as well. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of taste of what I'm thinking about science and faith. Thank you.